Camilla,
Yes.
I have almost an hour to talk, right? And then we have a discussion, right?
Yes, that's it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, good. Just to double
And
check.
then we normally leave the questions for the end, unless you want to leave free for people to ask in the middle. But normally we ask to them to at the
Yeah,
end.
that's fine.
Okay. Okay, so I think we can start. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Camila Valenzuela Mogillansky, and it is a great joy to welcome you all to the 5th session of the series of seminars, Technologies of Presence in Times of Absence. First of all, I would like to thank the great organizing team that made this event possible: Emerita, Esteban, Lilian, Ivan Nilsson, Tatiana, and Rafael. Additionally, special thanks to André Ficker for his contribution through simultaneous translation, Marcelo Gontillo for his work creating the graphics for this event, and of course to the Universidade Federal de São Paulo, the Núcleo de Pesquisa em Saúde e Uso de Substâncias, the CAPES-Print, a Mata Escola de Fenomenologia Corporal for their support. So before delving into the subject matter, I'm going to refer to some logistical aspects. We have simultaneous translation for the people that is in the Zoom room. In the chat, you can find the instructions to access the translation. Vou falar em português agora. Temos tradução simultânea para o português na sala do Zoom. Você pode acessá-la indo no ícone que aparece um mundo lá embaixo, tá bom? So regarding the dynamics of the discussion, there are two possible ways to ask the questions. The microphone will remain open after the presentation, but if you prefer also, you can send your question in a written form by using the link that we will post in the chat. And if you have any questions regarding this or other logistic issues, you can contact our organizing team that you can identify by their names on the square in the screen. Okay, so now let's turn our attention to the purpose of this seminar series. In a time where we face several global challenges, such as an unprecedented climate and environmental crisis, wars, humanitarian crisis, and political turmoil, we find it imperative to reflect on the potential of technologies of presence in addressing these challenges. The term technology often brings up images of computational and digital advancements, including digital devices, virtual spaces, and artificial intelligence that have permeated different domains of our lives. While beneficial in many ways, these developments often fall short in addressing these pressing issues that we are facing. Instead, they often exacerbate these challenges, such as worsening the climate crisis, impacting mental health, and increasing political polarization. Recognizing that the destructive or constructive potential of such technological developments does not depend on the technology itself, but on how we use it, we aim to emphasize that certain human practices enabling us to develop profound understanding and management of our bodies and minds constitute technologies in their own right. These practices reshape our relationship with our environment, including technological artifacts, as well as with others and ourselves. With this understanding, we define technologies of presence as the set of practices and knowledge that deepen our engagement with our own experience. More specifically, in this seminar, the notion of technologies of presence includes ancestral methods of interacting with our environment and body, psychophysical training associated with artistic practices and somatic approaches, meditation and movement practices, therapeutic techniques, enhancing sensory perception, and research methodologies centered on lived experience. So the aim of these seminars is to provide a platform for interdisciplinary reflection on these technologies of presence. Some questions that serve as axis for this reflection are: what does presence imply in attentional, experiential, social, and even physiological terms? What are the characteristics of the practices that cultivate it? What do these practices teach us in relation to alternative modes of knowledge generation? And finally, what is the relevance of technologies of presence in contemporary times? Last month, Professor Bathilele Malomalo introduced us to a notion of time and presence from the perspective of African philosophies, where time is understood as a technology of ancestry, memory, and reconciliation with oneself. Today, I have the great pleasure of welcoming a dear friend, I have to say, Professor Sabine Koch, who will address technology of presence in dance movement therapy and other creative arts therapies, and work with the example of Capoeira as technology of presence. Professor Sabine Koch is psychologist and dance movement therapist, director of the Research Institute for Creative Arts Therapies at Alanus University of Arts and Social Science in Bonn, Germany, and professor in the Dance Movement Therapy DMT Master Program at the SRH Heidelberg University. She's honorary professor also at the University of Melbourne in Australia. Thank you all for your presence and participation. And dear Sabine, thank you so much for being here today with us. And without further delay, I pass the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Camilla, for the friendly introduction. And I'm very happy to be with you tonight and to talk about capoeira and dance movement therapies as techniques of presence. I'm going to share my slides and let me know if that works. Oops. Here we go. All right. Do you see the slides? Good. Then we can start. So capoeira and dance therapy, two technologies of presence in times of absence. I'm daring to talk about capoeira with a team that comes from Brazil as a German. So let's see how that works. Last time we've heard from Professor Bathilele Malomalo, who has talked about the concepts of time and how the concepts of time can be culturally different in terms of relating to technologies of presence. And he was talking about the concept of kitembo, which is a concept in the Afro-Brazilian diaspora community, and it is containing time but also space. And I was really inspired by his talk, and I was also reminded that we also talk about subjective and objective time in phenomenology. And I wanted to just jot in at the beginning some thoughts that a friend of mine, Thomas Fuchs at the University of Heidelberg, has elaborated upon, and they are relating to space and time and psychopathology. And today we're going to talk about dance movement therapy, so we're very much also relating to patients that are particular to patients with mental health disorders. So let's see what Thomas Fuchs tells us about time experiences in health and in disease. So let me just move one back. Okay. So Husserl is basically talking about protension and retention in time. So there's the present moment, which we're going to talk about a lot today, the present moment, and the just have been and the just to be as protension and retention, which speak about, if I start a sentence, I already know where it ends. This is the intentional arc. And that is a concept coming from phenomenology, and Thomas Fuchs is applying the time experience, subjective time experience, also to psychopathologies. So what he found is in his research that in depression, the person usually experiences time as a slowing down, as a being much slower than the and I'm encountering myself in. And that in mania, on the other hand, the person experiences subjective time as a speeding up. I'm so fast and the others are so slow, and I have so many ideas and the others don't really, they can't really catch up with me. So that the time experience can also be related to some of the mental disorders that we encounter. And Thomas Fuchs says time is always also a relation to the others. This becomes clear when we start feeling alienated from others in illness. So this feeling of alienation, which we can also have when we deal with too much technology in our life, this feeling of alienation is also, or can be, a cause of health problems that we're going to talk about today. Let's start with dance movement therapy. Dance movement therapy works as a holistic method and with holistic goals, putting the entire person in the center of action, of healing. So it's der Mensch im Mittelpunkt, if we say it in German. The definition of dance movement therapy is that it is the therapeutic use of movement to further the physical, the cognitive, the emotional, the social, and the spiritual integration of the individual, according to the European Dance Movement Therapy Association. One of the basic assumptions in our dance movement therapy is that not only do we express affect and cognition in motion and action, but also does this motion and action feed back into our affective and cognitive system. So there's the expression function, which we are aware of, and Charles Darwin has written this beautiful book, The Expression of Emotions in Man and Animals, in 1872 already. So we know a lot. There's a long tradition of research on that expressive side. And then there's the impressive side of our movements feeding back into our affect and our cognition, and being also able to cause changes in affect and cognition. And that's what we work with in dance movement therapy, and what we see in many other body therapy techniques. This bidirectionality assumption was researched from the 70s of the last century on in the so-called body feedback hypotheses, which claim that afferent feedback, the feedback from the peripheral system or motor system to the brain, plays a causal role in the experience of emotion, in the formation of attitudes, and in behavior regulation, which are all important outcomes in therapies. A couple of people here in parentheses that have been pre-thinkers of this important line of research. In dance movement therapy, we encounter increasingly solid evidence-based research. So we have more than 60 studies by now that are controlled clinical trials. You can see, how that increased. So you can also see that there's an exponential growth in the last years. Just the last 4 years, we found 75 reviews on the effects of dance and the effects of dance movement therapy. We are just about to write this together in an umbrella review that we are doing in cooperation with the WHO and the Jamil Arts and Health Lab for a series in the Lancet. And then there are also specific reviews only on dance movement therapy from research groups such as SIA and Ground on schizophrenia, from Brad and Shim and Goodell in Drexel University in the US on cancer patients, or from Karku on depression and on dementia. Of course, these reviews and meta-analysis require excellent primary studies, and also on that side, we are gaining momentum in dance movement therapy. So just a little bit on the research side before we go more into the single effects. Our general meta-analysis show convergent evidence with consistent medium effect sizes for the populations in schizophrenia, depression, also in the decrease of anxiety, in the decrease of stress, in treating eating disorder and autism, in dealing with children and youth at risk, with somatization disorders, with oncological patients, with patients with cystic fibrosis, chronic pain, Parkinson, with dementia, and with chronic heart failure, and with fibromyalgia, where we've just put together a systematic review recently. So the standard medium mean differences in effects are between 0.30 and 0.40, which is a good effect size corresponding to many other therapeutic effects of other therapies. And what does it really act upon? So if we look at the outcomes of this research, we can say that there is mainly an increase in quality of life, an increase in well-being, and a decrease in clinical outcomes such as depression and anxiety. Also, there are studies that measure body image and interpersonal competence, but for body image, we have a measurement problem because it's such a difficult concept to measure with outcome measures. And for interpersonal competence, the outcome measures were too heterogeneous to actually compute an effect. As the number of studies increase, I'm sure that we can also say more about the increase in interpersonal competence through dance movement therapy. The 2019 study also showed that evidence is starting to be there for sustainability of the effects. So 6 studies had follow-up measures, and in 5 studies, the effects were either sustained or did even increase after a couple of months of the therapy. So that's some starting evidence on long-term effects. I just wanted to point out that in our fibromyalgia review, we had a researcher from Brazil, because we're having audience from Brazil, Andrea Batista, who is now Andrea Salvador, who did the art therapy study, the only art therapy study we have in that realm. And she also did a DMT study and a study on belly dance with fibromyalgia patients. She runs a business nowadays, and you can find her in the internet. Also, Clarissa Machado, who is in the public today, who's doing tango therapy, has contributed to the body of evidence. And I want to point out that Camila Valenzuela is also having her body practice in yoga and has also worked on fibromyalgia patients and the effects there. I think the 3 of you should connect and know each other. Here are some examples from my own dance therapy research. And if there are any questions that you want to pose immediately, because sometimes I'm quick, I'm only showing results, and you may want to know something about the methods, please feel free to also ask if it's a quick question just in the middle. The other questions, the more complex one, let's keep them for the end. So we did some research on autism, dance therapy for autism. That was an RCT, also an RCT on dance therapy with schizophrenia, and a CCT recently with traumatized refugee women, which I'm going to report on. In autism, we found basically that these were adolescents, that the body awareness was increasing over the course of the 7 weeks of therapy, 7 times. We had a control group of the same adolescents in the same living unit, but they didn't participate. So they were all in, this is a rehabilitation center where they were getting their professional education. So they were high functioning. Also, their social competence increased in the movement group. Particularly their well-being and their tension, the tension decreased, the well-being increased, and the perception of the borders between self and other, that what is sometimes a difficulty, also increased in the time that they were doing the dance movement therapy. We mostly used mirroring techniques in that dance movement therapy session because they have been researched before in case studies, but this was the first study who actually did work with the randomized control quantitative model. What we also did was we had them do body sculptures before and after the intervention. This is a projective test where you basically ask the person to form a body from clay. And in these body sculptures, it's really very visible how the 5 criteria that we're most looking at in them increase in the end of the therapy. So you can see more differentiation. The body parts are more realistic. The volume of the bodies increase. The surface of the bodies is mostly elaborated more and more differentiated, more detailed. So basically, that's a really, really nice technique to have, something visible of what our body work can actually do. We did it with the adolescents with autism, but also with the schizophrenic patients that I'm going to talk about briefly. And this is just an example for the mirroring technique and a hint to a very, very important study in our field. Rinat Finnegan-Schall from Israel did that study in 2018. And she found that mirroring actually is a correlate of attachment. So mirroring, and she did it with adults. I just used this picture because the kids are so cute. So she did it with adults, and what they found was that adults, when they are securely attached, they will mirror more freely. So they will take more freedom in mirroring and be more playful than other people with other attachment styles, like anxious avoidant. They will try to follow really exactly and stuff. So this is really interesting. I think it's one of our spearhead research in dance and drama therapy, because she's actually a drama therapist and a medical clown. We did another study in Heidelberg. This is Heidelberg, by the way. You have to visit if you have a chance because it's really beautiful. We did a study in the psychiatry department there with patients with schizophrenia, another RCT, where we used the method or also the manual or protocol of Frank Röhricht and Nina Papadopoulos, who developed that in London. It's a pretty free, it leaves the therapists free, pretty much freedom to also select interventions and adapt the interventions to the patients. It consists of 5 steps: an opening circle, a warm-up section, a structured task section, and then a creative movement section and a closing circle. What we found was that the manualized DMT, we had 20 sessions in the course of 10 weeks, had a positive effect on the negative symptoms. So while the medication can address the positive symptoms of schizophrenia and really decrease the hallucinations, medications cannot really work or do much for negative symptoms. But we found that dance therapy could significantly decrease the blunted affect of the negative symptoms, particularly. So it made people more expressive, interactive, and also it worked against the motor retardation. And also something we didn't even expect, we found an increase in attention and concentration, which is a cognitive outcome after these 20 sessions of dance movement therapy. Yeah, that's just, again, the effect of blunted affect and attention. And then the most recent study that I want to talk about briefly is a study that we did with traumatized refugee women in Heidelberg. And we just finished that in July. We also wanted to do a randomized control study. It's very important for our field to have these evidence-based studies because we're a small field. And if we want to survive in the health sciences, it's important to still do these classical medical randomized control trials, since most of the medical guidelines, for example, are accepting these as the best evidence, just to explain that to you why we're doing these. We wanted to do a randomized control trial, but in the first group, there were only 7 women from 14 really coming. So we said, okay, we'll do a within group study. We have a waiting period, and then we have a period where we do 8 weeks of dance therapy. We did that without any protocol or manual this time because we really didn't know which people would come and what their needs would be. So we really wanted to adapt our interventions to the needs of the women. Some wonderful students from SRH University helped me with that. They were, people who spoke the languages of the refugees, students from Iran who did co-therapy, the co-therapist role, and from Ukraine and from Turkey. So a big thanks to all my students and to the other researchers and therapists on the team at this point. Here is what happened. We measured symptoms of trauma, symptoms of depression, symptoms of anxiety and of stress. And as you can see in the first, can you actually see the cursor? I hope so. So in the first period, the 8 weeks waiting period, there was nothing much happening. Even the symptoms were getting a little bit worse. This was non-significant. And then in the 8 weeks of the actual dance movement therapy, we see a significant drop in the symptoms in depression, anxiety, and stress, as well as in trauma symptoms. And the third measure was the refugee health screener, which measures also all of these symptoms in a short form. The women were very burdened when they came to us. They were all falling under severely burdened when we looked at their values. And then in the end, the trauma symptoms were decreasing to under the clinical cutoff value, which was a real big success after only 8 weeks of treatment. Also, what was good was that we were not working in the clinics here where they had multiple therapies. They only had dance movement therapy. So we can be pretty sure that the effect is dating back to dance movement therapy. And we had a fully powered sample. It was only 24 women, but in a within group design, that was all we needed to have the fully powered study. So let's look at a little bit of the implications of these results. As I already said, we have small example, but it has a high clinical relevance, particularly if you look at the fact that in Germany, only 3.1% of the refugee population with trauma symptoms in need of treatment is actually getting mental health treatment. So there's a big, big gap in mental health offers for refugees here. And DMT can be a cost saving and a culturally appropriate treatment form. So cost saving because our therapists, of course, we needed to pay them, but there was no, medication is often much more expensive and the clinical stays are much more expensive. So this was, just a regular, not in the clinic, but in a dance studio intervention. And it already brought all the symptoms down so much that we think this could be a cost-saving alternative for treating this population. Also in stress reduction, we have two major studies that show that actually all of the creative arts therapies, that's what CATS stands for, are effective, and more than 80% of the studies showed a significant stress reduction through the creative arts therapies. And just one brief look into drama therapy, because I think drama therapy is a wonderful blend of all of the other arts therapies, art, music, and dance therapy, because it works with all of these elements. And we have great colleagues recently who are driving the research forward. I've already talked about Renat Veniga-Schal. There's Hot Okibi, there's Shoshi Kaisari, there's Nisha Sajnani, and Kelly Armstrong, and also Angel Cook, who are doing great work in putting drama therapy also on an evidence base. This is just an example of a study of Shoshi Kaisari. Wonderful study. If you want to read a great study in drama therapy, I recommend this one, where she is working in nursing homes with drama therapy techniques and with great success, also with demented patients. So we know that dance therapy is actually working, but what we don't know is how it actually works. So at the moment, we're moving into the direction of looking at the mechanisms. Which parts of the interventions are actually really effective and which ones are not so effective. And this, of course, has then also, if we learn more about that, big implications on our training, on creation of manuals, and all of that. So here is a thought from my side about this. In a scoping review from 2021, we found that there are three crucial joint therapeutic factors of the creative arts therapies. And the first one of those is embodiment. And the second one of them is concretization or enactment. And the last one of those is symbolic communication. And I actually think there's a sequence to those, because first of all, the patient needs to really sense what's going on in their bodies, which would be the embodiment component. And once the patient is able to sense that, then the patient can also start to express that in a concrete or also a volatile artwork. A dance and a music piece would be more volatile. But if you think about visual arts or work with clay, there are ways to express things also in an artwork that is lasting. So that would be the concretization or enactment factor. And then when that has crystallized, when a symbol or a metaphor has crystallized, then this can also be communicated to the therapist or to the entire therapy group, and it can be worked with in order to drive healing processes forward. These factors were collected in a theory model, the model of embodied aesthetics, where we find that there are factors on the receptive side, on the side of the sensory, such as, noticing what's going on in your body. And on that side, we have the experience of beauty that may be a really important therapeutic factor of dance therapy, the other arts therapies. We have the experience of the body-mind unity. I feel whole again. I feel, the body-mind unity. But we also have factors that are on the active side, on the expressive side. For example, the test acting. I can try myself out in this safe space, in this therapeutic space. I can create something. I can find rituals or metaphors for what's going on, also in movement and in expressive elements. I can play. I can get into creative space, play space, as if space. I can get into this communicative space where I can do test relating with the therapist, with the others in the group. And on the receptive side again, I can use imagination and emergence as therapeutic factors. If we look quantitatively at these processes, we can use mediation analysis to find out more about therapeutic factors, such as the aesthetic experience, which of course is one of the major candidates in our creative or expressive arts therapies as a change factor that is also unique maybe to creative arts therapies. And let's hop over, because we can also apply all these factors that I've just talked about and look whether they are to be found in the art of Capoeira. So those of you who haven't seen Capoeira, I've put a link here. It's to the UNESCO World Cultural Heritage site. Capoeira is a World Cultural Heritage since 2014. And this is a very good and dense video on it. Wow, what is Capoeira? Capoeira has different directions, such as Capoeira Angola, Capoeira Regional, Capoeira Contemporânea, and it has a lot of different games, plays, melodies, rhythms where you play different games, and there's a lot to learn. It has songs of longing, songs of homesickness, songs that are related to the history of slavery, songs of oppression. It has songs of play, songs of fight, but it also has songs of healing and of curing. It's very interesting. So we have an element in there that may already point us to Capoeira as an art that can also be employed in a healing context. We have a lot of humorous songs, funny songs, but we also have the really serious ladainhas, the Lovation songs that are often starting off the Capoeira roda. I can maybe give you an example of a Lovation song and talk a little bit about the starting of a roda. I'm recommending this book. It's a small little book by Nestor Capoeira, and he describes in a very phenomenological way. I'm not sure you can see that, but it's called Capoeira. It exists in German. I have a German version in English and in Portuguese, and the author is called Nestor Capoeira, so nomen est omen. And he describes really in a very beautiful phenomenological way what happens in the Capoeira practice. So I wanted to recommend this today, and also wanted to recommend a second book. This is Capoeira, Semente da Ancestralidade Africana no Brasil, by Mestre Pardal, who is a friend.
Closer to the screen, otherwise.
A little closer? Okay, like that?
No, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Okay. Anyway, they are also in the references, and I can send the presentation later on so that you can maybe see that. Okay. A ladainha starts even with a scream, a yay. And then the song follows. I'll give you an example that I learned from Mestre João Grande, also on a webinar, by the way. Yay! Quem pede, pede chorando, quem dá merece vontade. É triste de quem pede com a sua necessidade. Lá no céu vai quem merece, na terra vale quem tem camará. Aqui tereis, aqui tereis camará. And then the group comes in and the singer sings a phrase, and the group repeats and replies the same phrase and mirrors it back to the singer. In this book of Nestor Capoeira, I found that he describes really nicely how the Capoeira roda starts, where the two players are sitting at the foot of the berimbau, which is the leading instrument. And he says, the slow and hypnotic rhythm of the berimbau gains ownership of those both players that are ducked in front of the berimbau, and their mind is starting to get free from ideas and thoughts. They start to be only in the here and now. They get rid of everything, and they may feel themselves as old as the ritual in which they are starting to participate. So I just, this is like pages of these beautiful descriptions. So I just really recommend to look into that if you want to look at the practice of presence that we can find in Capoeira. And I think really this being totally in the here and now, which is necessary for playing the game, is one of the factors that is so important and can also have such a big healing momentum. As we also already know about, tango therapy, which also brings people totally in the here and now, because you need to listen so closely and differentiatedly to that other body and where that other body wants to get you. So this being totally in the here and now is helpful in and of itself, in one of our techniques of presence. And I have brought a very small video about Capoeira for the ones of you who have not seen it before. And this is from a project that is called Capoeira for Refugees. It's an UK NGO that was founded when the Syrian war was starting. So it's already operating for many years, always in the area of where refugee camps are. And we have a lot of movement and work with refugees. So let me just show you that. It's just 1.5 minutes. I think we have the time. Okay, and wait, how do I get back to my presentation? Very good question. Maybe I'll just and continue and load it again. Sorry for that. So we are basically here. Yes. All right. Here we are. We recently did a meta-analysis on the health effects of capoeira, and we found 19 studies, many of them done in Brazil, also many of them done in the context with children and adolescents. We searched 3 search machines, found these 19. And the interesting thing was that we were looking at physical, physiological, and also more psychosocial changes. And the physiological changes were not more pronounced than in any other sport, right? So they were there, but they were not very pronounced. But the psychosocial outcomes were really significantly strengthened by capoeira. And there was well-being, and there was like pro-social behavior, like the reduction of aggressive and angry behavior towards others and the increase of pro-social behavior. Also a change in dietary habits and in generally health behavior, which comes with the philosophy of capoeira. So that's also, of course, a positive lifestyle change and other variables. So that's hopefully then increasing also the future studies on capoeira for health. One of our philosophers in Heidelberg, it's Gadamer, Hans-Georg Gadamer, wrote a lot about the effects of art. And he already identified in 1977 that there are three major elements through which the arts work. It's play, symbol, and feast. Feast like in celebration. So play, the roda is of course an interactional play space that is used for co-creation, for negotiation, and that is used with a lot of, here and now and reciprocity, as we've already heard. The symbolic character, there's a lot of ritual and symbol in the capoeira. And of course, it works with nonverbal expression, interaction, and communication. And the feast character, I would say every time we get together in a roda, it's a celebration of life. It has ritual aspects, it has energy aspects, and it has a lot of joyful aspects. In dance therapy, we have similar therapeutic factors. You've already seen them before. Just here, once again, on the sensory side, we have the experience of body-mind unity. We have the experience of beauty. We have the aesthetic experience. And on the more active creation side, we have the experience of choice, of control, of creativity, and so on. Our own empirical studies on therapeutic factors of dance therapy showed that the non-goal directedness of the dance is one of the major therapeutic factors, that I'm not really goal directed. I'm moving, but I'm not moving towards, or I'm not moving in a functional way. I'm not getting a book out of a shelf. So the non-goal directedness of the movement was a major element and therapeutic or change factor. The experience of the body-mind unity, the experience of the unity with the partner, in pair dance, in tango, for example, really important. The experience of the unity with the music, the bouncing, and next to the bouncing, maybe also the training of the ankle flexibility, which Clarissa Machado is detecting as a therapeutic factor. The active creation and the aesthetic experience. So active creation was researched even across the creative expressive forms, and was found that the experience freedom, the experience choice, the experience control, and the experience creativity in creative expression was increasing the well-being and the self-efficacy of the participants. If we think not only about dance therapy, but overarching on all the arts and that we can think about, we can cluster the therapeutic factors maybe in 5 clusters. One would be related to pleasure and play. We can call it the cluster of hedonism. It's art for pleasure and play. One is related to aesthetics, where we have art for beauty, but not beauty in the sense of beauty, but beauty also in the sense of authenticity and authentic expression. So it can be also my anger expression that is an aesthetic expression for me and a helpful expression for me. Symbol is, of course, important. We've heard that many times now. Nonverbal meaning making in symbolizing and communicating, and also belonging to that art is there, makes us also feel seen, mirrored, and that's in and of itself also a therapeutic element. Then there's the inactive transitional space, the safe space, the play space, the as-if space, where I can do reality testing and relational testing, and where I can get to mastery of my problem that I'm coming in with. And then the generativity, which is about creation, productivity, the feeling that I'm in control, I'm in power, I'm in my resources, which art can help us with. So let's look at the 3 remaining therapeutic factors, whether we can also find them in the art of Capoeira. This is aesthetics, and of course, aesthetics plays a major role in the games, particularly in the game of Benguela, but also in other games. The goal is to play a beautiful game that follows the criteria of reciprocity and flow, and so on. And last time, Professor Malomalo said the vagiação is important in that as well. An active transitional space is the second to last, and in Capoeira we have a lot of enactment, and also if you're playing in your own group, it is a safe space. If you're not playing in your own group, it may not be, but it is in any case a liminal space that allows you for test acting and also relational testing. And then the generativity, the inactive and interactive creation. Capoeira is an active co-creation and is done in an intimate unit of 2 players. That is, the creation is always a co-creation. It's highly inactive and interactive, similar to the improvisational couple dance of Tango Argentino, which I was already referring to. That's the literature I used for the Capoeira. The first one is the one with the phenomenological descriptions that I recommended. The last one is the one about the history and the ancestralidade. And I want to point out that not only we have the cultural heritage techniques of Capoeira, but also of flamenco and of tango, which are also both cultural heritage techniques, also both coming from oppressive contexts, right? So I think there's something inherent in these oppressive contexts, in these art forms that stem from oppressive contexts that may also be really suited to strengthen the resilience of, patients, because that's what their history is about, strengthening resilience. Yeah, we have projects here also with Tango Argentino for Parkinson patients. We've been working with flamenco also in our psychiatry unit with the trauma patients. So there are also many benefits. The best researched of all of these arts is tango, and I'm using a slide of Clarissa Machado, who may be in the audience today. Tango is just very well suited, gives so many opportunities to initiate for Parkinson patients, which is a difficulty for them, bring them into the flow experience. The focus on the partner makes them forget that they are doing things that they usually don't do because of the fear of falling. So they move back and they turn and they do movements that they usually would probably avoid in everyday life. So that's very helpful. And I think I'm at the end of my presentation, and I'm very much looking forward to all of your questions and remarks and comments and to our discussion together.
Thank you so much, Sabine, for such a rich and moving presentation. And yeah, thank you very much. So the mic is open. We have already a question from Gustavo. You would prefer me to do it, Gustavo, or you want to do it? I can ask for you if you want, or you can ask yourself. You want me to read it?
Dá para me ouvir?
Sim.
Dá? Eu comecei a fazer capoeira recentemente aqui na minha cidade, porque com o tempo ela foi reduzindo, porque antigamente era um projeto social que tinha na cidade inteira, e aí conforme as verbas foram sendo alteradas, outros projetos foram tendo outros andamentos, então a capoeira ela foi sendo menos frequente. Então até demorei para encontrar capoeira aqui na cidade. Eu também sou psicólogo voltado para fenomenologia. Então, eu até agradeço pela pesquisa, pelos estudos e fico muito feliz de estar aqui. E aí eu queria saber como que funciona dentro dos estudos, porque lá quando eu estou fazendo, quando eu estou na roda, eu estou jogando, é uma sensação, é um sentimento. Mas no sentido de estudos, como que funciona essa conexão com a nossa ancestralidade? Porque quando eu estou jogando capoeira, só está eu lá e o outro, não existe mais nada. Então, as músicas, a roda, as palmas, aquela energia que tem naquele espaço, naquele ambiente, faz aquele momento ser único e que não volta mais, assim como todos os outros. E é assim que eu me sinto lá. E a gente sente, pelo menos eu, quando estou jogando, uma energia muito forte de ancestralidade. É como se eu enraizasse na terra novamente, onde não existe tecnologias, onde não existe problemas, mas só o momento presente. E dentro dos estudos, vocês chegaram a verificar essas partes ancestrais nos movimentos que tem tanto quanto hoje? Essa seria mais ou menos a minha pergunta.
Mhm.
So let me
Yeah,
just sorry, Sabine, because I'm afraid that the people who doesn't speak Portuguese didn't
absolutely.
understand the question. So, and like our translator is in the other channel, so I think he couldn't translate. So I will do a brief summary of the question, just for the people who doesn't speak Portuguese can understand. So briefly, I think that translation could be something like, how do you do it in the context of a study to reproduce all the energy, the context, the contact with the ancestrality that you have in the road of capoeira? So all this energy where you are outside of your daily worries or technology, you are there in the road. How do you do to study that in a scientific context?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Of course, as a practitioner of capoeira, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'm afraid that I can't say anything about really the correlation with the ancestrality, because that's not really my area, you know. But of course, in the studies, when we do quantitative studies, there's no good way to transmit any of that. That's why I'm so fond of the phenomenological studies that we have and the phenomenological descriptions, because that's the only way we can get close to the richness that we can experience in a capoeira roda and in this technique of presence and in other techniques of presence as well, of course. Yeah. But I like to, and I want to add that when we do quantitative studies, I'm trying to find increasingly ways of transmitting the actual matter that we're talking about, you know, the art per se. In our fibromyalgia review that we did, we had a student of mine who is suffering from fibromyalgia herself. And while she did the quantitative analysis, she also brought in a kind of an orthoethnographic method to describe her own experiences, or let's say in a phenomenological way. And she did that intertwined with the quantitative analysis. And I think these may be ways of better transmitting what we're actually talking about, even in quantitative research. So I think it would be good if we find more creative ways to transmit that also in quantitative studies.
Thank you. Vanilson, you had a question?
Não, eu ia fazer uma pergunta parecida com o do Gustavo, né? Mas eu acho que a professora já falou um pouco sobre essa impossibilidade, né? Mensurar isso quantitativamente falando. Ele falou sobre ancestralidade. Eu vou além. Eu quero colocar o conceito aqui da existência, sabe? Como nesse meio a gente pode experimentar uma coisa que remete à nossa existência, que vai conectar com a ancestralidade também, sabe? Eu acho que são práticas que vão emergir da opressão, né? Aí entra a minha outra questão aqui. Como é que a gente pode pegar estudos fenomenológicos para, né? A gente tem aqui capoeira. Capoeira, a gente sabe que nasce da resistência da opressão, né? No meio da opressão. No meu país, a gente tem dança que já vai fazer face enfrentar a opressão. Essas danças não vão nascer no momento da opressão. Já existiam, estão lá para resistir à opressão do colonizador, sabe? Na Guiné, falo no meu país, Guiné-Bissau, a gente tem várias danças, né, que resistiram o processo colonial português. Ainda essas danças estão lá. Claro que a globalização vai sugando do jeito dela, né? A gente vai ter pouca representatividade como antigamente, né? Mas essa coisa existencial da cultura, da vida humana, dar sentido à nossa vida, eu acho super interessante. Que pena a gente não vai ter métodos, nem sei se métodos qualitativos dão conta disso, métodos quantitativos menos ainda, eu acho, ao meu ver, menos ainda, mas são coisas assim super importantes que dão sentido à nossa existência aqui como seres, se assim posso dizer. Obrigado.
I'm not sure I can translate that.
Shall we do it together?
Yeah, go ahead.
Even I
Ficou difícil
understand Portuguese, but I
minha...
don't understand everything. But I will try to catch the gist of what Ivan Nilsson said. He said, yes, he says, yes, on the one hand, he can imagine that it's not possible, but it's also a shame that we can't really transmit what is happening in these techniques. And he's talking about dances, maybe the dance of Jongo or the dance of Frevo or the dance of, I'm not sure which dance you mean, Ivan Nilsson. Qual dances, qual danças estava você falando?
Na Guiné, estou referindo aqui o contexto guinense. Guiné-Bissau é um país da África Ocidental colonizado pelos portugueses. Na Guiné, a gente tem várias danças. A gente tem gumbé, a gente tem grupos... gumbé é dança assim, meio que nacional. Como aqui capoeira é uma coisa brasileira, na Guiné a gente tem gumbé. A gente vai ter variedades dessas danças dependendo da configuração da nação étnica. Você vai ter grupo de mulheres reunidas, né, para fazer atividade do dia a dia, né, na Guiné, né, na Guiné a gente chama de grupo de manjuandade, dançando gumbé, né, chamando, né, dando essa força simbólica que a professora colocou, que vai muito além do simbólico, traz a questão existencial também, da força da mulher africana, da força da mulher guinense. Como é que a mulher guinense enfrenta certas dificuldades do dia a dia? E esse grupo de mandiandade é um grupo meio com espaço de compartilhar a experiência, né? De expor sobre a vida do dia a dia. E a dança entra para ajudar, dar leveza à vida, né? Face a vários problemas que as mulheres enfrentam no Guiné e no mundo também. A gente não pode esquecer isso, que a gente tem uma sociedade em que a mulher sai perdendo, dependendo da organização política do país, você vai ter pouco sofrimento das mulheres face a questões sociais. Claro, em todo mundo a gente vai ter essas dificuldades das mulheres, mas na Guiné a gente tem esse espaço onde essas mulheres compartilham essas experiências, pegando dança e demais outras coisas, que traz o existencial no meio. O Gustavo usou ancestralidade, eu estou usando aqui a palavra existencial, dar sentido à nossa vida. Era isso, mais ou menos.
Yeah. So he was pointing out that we have lots of dances also that are practices of decolonialization, or that are responses to the colonialization, and that is lived reality. And he made an example of the Goomba, which is a dance that women dance, and it's really also very intertwined with everyday life and the living situation of the women. Camilla, can you add something to that? Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, and he was pointing at this, that Gustavo was referring to this link with ancestrality, but he wanted to add and point to this existential aspects of
the life reality. Yeah, and of course, if we practice capoeira in Germany, it's a totally different approach for us, right? Because we start to learn something about Afro-Brazilian culture. We start to learn something about the value system, and this is increasing. In the beginning, many of the people who join our group think they're doing a sport, and then they discover slowly that they're actually doing a cultural practice. And they learn about the entire culture, and they learn about the entire value system. They learn about African philosophies, the idea of Ubuntu, the ideas of, and for me, and probably also for others who start to learn it here, this is a very beautiful process of gaining appreciation and a new perspective that makes our world much richer. And what I would like to do in research, actually, I've thought about that many times. I would like to really do an interview study, because we always have people in the group who are there for half a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and just see how their perspective on capoeira and doing the cultural practice changes in the course of the years, and how their knowledge grows. I think that would be a beautiful study, actually. So you're just bringing me back to this idea that I should probably look more into a qualitative study like this, in order to explore the meaning of the practice for the people in different stages of acquiring it.
Thank you. Okay, so we have another question on the chat from Kiran Gorky. I will read it.
I can do it.
Okay.
Okay.
So just to say that if you do your question in English, you can do it in this channel. If you want to do your question in Portuguese for everybody, in the bottom of the screen, there is an icon like a planet, and you click on Portuguese, and then we can have the simultaneous translation going on. So just to switch the channel, if you want to make your question loud in Portuguese, okay?
Okay, I'll do it in English. Okay, first of all, Dankeschön, Sabine, das war echt toll. I'm also a dance move therapist, and I have 2 questions. They're kind of more technical or more conceptual. First, in the beginning of your presentation, you talk about affective system and cognitive systems, and I would like to know if you really see a difference there, because I kind of see the affective system, a kind of intrinsic part of our cognitive system. So the way we know, the way we learn about ourselves and the world. And the second question is, one of the most of the DMT approaches use improvisation as practice or as a method. So is there a correlation for you between improvised movement and the positive effects of DMT? I ask this because my research is about improvisation.
Yeah. Thank you, Kiran, for the question. And the first one, I think, yes, we should really talk about the cognitive affective system with a dash in between, because we know that there are so many connections. And the way you look at it, I think, also makes a lot of sense to me, that the affective is included within the cognitive. But you can also say there are just so many connections that are well researched in psychology that it makes sense to talk about one entire system, a cognitive affective system. And then the second question, the DMT.
Improvisation.
And improvisation, yes. One of our studies where we were actually looking at this non-goal directedness, we worked with improvisation, and we worked with students who have reported symptoms of stress. We had a lot of students, actually. I was very surprised in the beginning of this study that had severe stress with also bodily symptoms in our university, because we were looking for people who feel stress, and then we asked them about it. And then we had one of the groups improvise on 3 songs, and the other groups got a really structured task on the 3 songs that was also including movement from one chair to the other, take one of the forms, a rectangle, a triangle, put it on the other chair, stuff like. And then we looked how that affected the reduction of stress, how that affected the increase of body self-efficacy and the increase of well-being. And we found a clear advantage of improvisation, of the improvised movement, the one that we called non-goal directed, right? Because the other one was goal directed. But that's actually the difference between improvisation and a goal-directed movement task. You can say that as well. So I would recommend you to look at this. This is published in 2017 in the Arts and Psychotherapy by Solveig Wiedenhofer and myself. So it's Wiedenhofer and Koch. I'll just write it in the chat for you so you can find it. Wiedenhofer with an E-A. I-E. Let me just find my chat here. Chat. The Arts and Psychotherapy.
Okay, Dankeschön. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Question.
If nobody has a question, I would like to pose a question to you, because I'm still very curious how it is perceived from you. We have capoeira players here. We have people from the Afro-Brazilian, ancestralidade here. If you look at me as a German doing capoeira and talking about it, what are your thoughts? Is there anything that I should consider? I think it's really, it would be great for me to hear from you.
O pensar que ela fala é em que sentido? No termo de sentimento, quando ela está na roda, em qual sentido seria?
It's more about the cultural appropriateness.
If you will answer in Portuguese, go to the icon.
Então, eu tenho um comentário, não sei se a Camila quer falar.
Mas, Ivanilson, do it in the channel of the Portuguese, so then André can translate it simultaneously. So on the bottom of your screen, go to the interpretation icon. You see the channel?
Isso. Coloquei.
And then you can just free and talk.
Coloquei. Posso falar? Dá para falar agora? Eu acho que não estou
André, are you listening to him?
O André tem que sair do canal de português e vir para o canal de inglês.
And I don't think that will quite work because, yeah, so they said, Andre said to the Portuguese channel, and well, I can switch him very quickly to the English interpretation and then back
Yeah,
Portuguese.
yeah,
Or we
let's do
can
it.
keep doing what we were doing that's sort of working and
Okay,
translate.
okay. I try to translate in this channel. Go ahead, Ivan Nilsson. You can speak in the channel that you were before. Sorry.
Ótimo.
Yeah,
Deixa eu
you just
tentar.
talk. You can talk
Aqui?
in Portuguese, yes, and we will translate.
Ok. Não, sobre a pergunta dela, eu tenho um comentário sobre isso. Eu acho falar sobre o racismo, falar sobre violência de gênero, falar sobre vários temas que a gente tem hoje em dia, não necessariamente a pessoa, por exemplo, sobre o racismo, não necessariamente a pessoa tem que ser negro para falar sobre o racismo. Isso aqui é o meu ver. Ivanilson aqui falando. O que eu acho de errado, falar sobre racismo, é para ganhar protagonismo. A pessoa branca falando sobre racismo para ganhar protagonismo. Mas desde já que você está trazendo o tema para mostrar que tem certo grupo de pessoas sofrendo sobre um determinado fenômeno, eu acho que não tem problema. É a mesma coisa sobre a capoeira. Desde já que a professora está expandindo o conhecimento, a vivência, né, dessas pessoas, a resistência dessas pessoas, eu acho, a meu ver, eu acho que não tem nenhum problema sobre isso. Feminicídio não é só a mulher que tem que falar sobre isso. O homem também pode falar, sabe? Desde já que não vai pegar sobre o tema, sobre o fenômeno, para ganhar protagonismo com isso, mas sim mostrar a dificuldade que as mulheres estão passando na sociedade, né? No dia a dia. Essa aqui é a minha opinião sobre o que ela colocou.
Gustavo.
Eu também concordo com o Ivanilson. Se
Deixa eu
senti...
só traduzir. I will translate Ivan Nilsson and then...
Oh, sorry.
So Ivan Nilsson said that he wanted to make a comment and that he thinks that he made a parallel, like talking about racism or violence against gender violence or feminicide. I don't know in English the word feminicide. But it's not only Black people that can talk about racism, or not only women that can talk about how the violence against women. If you are talking in the sense of caring about these themes, everybody can talk. And so the same with capoeira. If you are talking about this to expand this culture and show these practices and the relevance of these practices to the world, it's for him, I think he thinks it's completely fine. But not in the sense of, I will talk about racism to do my own, like a white person talking about racism to make own status, but because he's caring about the situation. I try to do my best translating. So Gustavo, you wanted to talk?
Dá para ouvir certinho? Eu concordo com o Ivanilson na parte do protagonismo que ele falou. Tanto é que uma das coisas que o mestre de capoeira me ensinou é que cada um deve conquistar o seu próprio espaço dentro da roda. Então, quando você conquista o seu espaço dentro da roda, não é ultrapassando os limites para conquistar o do outro. Mas quando você conquista o seu próprio espaço, é de acordo com o que você é, com a sua própria força. Aí eu entro, igual o Ivanilson falou, a sua própria existência. Então, o seu modo de existir dentro daquele ambiente, sem ultrapassar e desrespeitar os outros grupos da roda. Tanto é que as crianças jogam com a gente, mulheres, homens, pessoas de idade também jogam todos na mesma roda com a gente, e é sempre o mesmo respeito com os limites do outro também. Então, quando eu jogo capoeira junto com os outros, eu não vejo a minha parte egóica, nem como se eu fosse protagonista, mas como se eu fizesse parte de uma comunidade, de algo que é fraterno, porque é como se todos da roda fossem um só. Então, cada um tem o seu espaço e o seu elemento, o seu sorriso, o seu modo de jogar. Então, ninguém é tão diferente quanto o outro, vamos dizer assim, mas cada um tem sua própria força e essa energia e essa alegria vai transmitir para todos os outros membros do grupo. Então, quando você fala de se eu estou me apropriando ou não, eu acho que eu veria mais uma pergunta para eu mesmo. Qual é a minha força, a minha alegria dentro deste jogo de capoeira? Se eu consigo transmitir isso para os outros também. Então, seria mais nesse sentido que eu vejo.
You.
I think I can understand your question, and as a
Com licença, Kira. Eu acho que a Camila tem que
I
traduzir.
will translate Gustavo first.
okay, sorry.
So Gustavo agreed with what Ivanilso said, and in the line of reflecting about this protagonism and how his capoeira mestre teach him how you conquer your space within the roda. And to conquer your space, you will conquer it from your own nature, your own way of doing capoeira, your own abilities and weaknesses. And so from that personal way, you will conquer your space in a very respectful way. So not step over others, or in a fraternal, I don't know if that word exists in English, fraternal way and respectful way. So that's why we could in a same roda have old people, kids, men, women. So we respect the boundaries and the limits of oneself and the other. So thinking about that and answering the question that Sabine posed, he's saying like, he will ask himself, which is my strength, which is my joy in this of working with capoeira. I think more or less that was it.
Yeah. Gustavo, thank you so much for this beautiful answer. It's also how it feels to me, you know, we are really one family in the Capoeira group, and it feels very egalitarian, even though there is a hierarchy, of course, but it feels very egalitarian and very much like everybody can be themselves in what they bring to the group and the Roda at that moment. So thank you for this really beautiful description.
Yeah, I see the points from Ivanilso and from Gustavo, very well spoken. But I was living 12 years in Germany, and I can see a bit why you question, and I think it's there are some differences, and there are also some dark sides in the capoeira community. Brazilian, a white and a gay man, and I was trying to start studying capoeira twice, and it was a very bad experience. There was too much prejudice because my color and my sexual option. So until I find a third group where for them this was not a problem. But when you talk about capoeira in Europe, it's totally different because the people they go there, in the case of Brazilian people, they know already that these people they are going to teach are different, are white people from another culture. And the work you are doing, the research you are doing is so important. It's important because it's bringing the whole philosophy, the whole practice of capoeira in itself for many people that would not be reached just by classes alone. So I will only say thank you for the job you're doing. You are doing amazing. And I wouldn't be feeling strange or kind of I'm appropriating. No, I'm not appropriating because there are also white people here in Brazil doing capoeira. And so what's the real difference? So I don't know. I only have to say thank you to you for what you are doing. So that's my opinion.
Mhm. Thanks, Kiran, for the appreciation.
So maybe a last question. Lily, you want me to read it? Is Lily? Where is Lily? Lily. Should I read it? Lily? I will read it. Yeah? Okay, I will read it. So enactive phenomenology presents the concept of living being and life as the coordination of action and emotion. The presentation seems to make it clear that the connection factor of the being with itself, with its ancestry, with others, with the world, is one of the key factors for healing process. Is this really true? How can we measure the impact of this very subjective factor constructed in the relational field? Could you mention more phenomenological tools, methodologies through which this could be possible?
Oh, Camilla, that's a question for you, actually, if we talk about phenomenological methodologies. That's not totally my domain. Of course, how can we know? I can use my psychological toolbox, which I'm doing when we're doing controlled studies or systematic reviews. So I'm using the tools I have in order to try and approximate these questions of what can we know about what is really doing the job for, what is really a healing technique, a technique of presence that is at the same time healing. But for the phenomenological methods, maybe Camilla, you can give us an idea of what you see there as some possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, I think always we kind of try to approach this complex experiential phenomena through different paths, I will say. And so from the phenomenological side, we have interview methods. There are different kind of methods. Personally, I work with the microphenomenological interview, but there are also other types of interview. But what I think today and what I'm working on is how to combine tools from these different approaches, like artistic practices, somatic practices, the tools from microphenomenology, to create a space for familiarization and observation of our experience, which is where all these more complex aspects of this phenomenon manifest. So the experience of healing or of joy while improvising, how to transmit, how to understand, if the final goal of science is to understand. So how can we use maybe tools from the arts that work on the resonance side more than a linear comprehension, but an open-ended comprehension. So I think there are many different tools, but I think we have to think mainly on the framework. So like the epistemological framework in which we conceive this generation of knowledge regarding these practices, let's say.
Yeah, I think that's important to reflect on the values and the epistemological stance that you're actually taking when you want to answer these questions. So we know from which perspective the answer is given. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. That's a great question.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Sabine, very much for your presence, your presentation. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. And yeah, we keep going with these monthly seminars. Next month, the 5th of November, we have the next seminar, and we will welcome Claire Petit-Menjan. So you are all very much welcome. The registrations are open. And yeah, just to thank you, Sabine. It was very rich and inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you for organizing. And everybody for being here. Bye.
Have a great night. Good rest.